From a young age, my dreams were a place where reality and fantasy mixed. At night, a strange boy a few years older than me would visit, quickly becoming my best friend in that world between sleep and waking. In that dream world, we were always together. Our nights were filled with amazing games and adventures. We flew on winged horses and sailed pirate ships on blue seas. His laughter and playful spirit brought joy to my young heart. At first, my parents treated my stories about this dream friend like any of my other imaginative tales. But when I started describing him in detail, my mother turned pale. What I didn't know was that the boy in my dreams looked exactly like my uncle, who had died in a boating accident when he was young, years before I was born. His death was so painful for my grandparents that they hid all photos and memories of him. Yet my dream friend looked just like him, with messy sandy hair and freckles on his nose. How could I, who had never seen my uncle, imagine someone who looked so much like him? A sense of unease settled over our home. My parents began lighting candles and saying prayers each night, trying to banish the ghost from my dreams. For a while it didn't work, and the boy kept appearing. Then came the dream that changed everything. We were in a beautiful meadow, but something was different. The boy looked serious as he held out a red orb in his hand. At first I thought it was candy, but he insisted I take it, looking sadder with each refusal. "Please," he said, his voice trembling. "You must take it." I felt scared and confused, and as I kept saying no, he grew more upset until I woke up. The last thing I saw was the boy, alone and sad, holding the red orb like something precious he could never fix. When I told my mother, she said the boy was trying to take over my body. From that night on, he never appeared in my dreams again. As the years passed, the memory faded, but now and then I wonder about it. Maybe one day I'll find the courage to explore my past and understand the mystery of the boy in my dreams. Even now, decades later, I can't be sure if my mother's words were true, that the boy was trying to take over my body through our dreams. It sounds like something out of a horror story rather than a logical explanation. But I can't ignore the shiver of fear that runs down my spine whenever I remember that last terrifying dream. The boy's desperate plea for me to accept a red orb, and the sadness on his face when I refused. Felt like I was witnessing something deeply unsettling beyond my understanding as a child. My mother spoke about it with a seriousness I rarely saw in her, adding to the eerie feeling. Was the boy's spirit really trying to take over my body? The thought alone chills me. I don't know if my mother's interpretation was just superstition or had some truth to it. All I know is that the experience and her words disturbed me then, and still haunt me now. Before I fall asleep, I sometimes wonder, if I had taken the red orb from the boy, would I have opened the door to something terrible? Or would it have been an act of kindness for a troubled soul? This uncertainty feeds my lingering fear. The unknown has a way of nurturing our deepest fears until they grow into something that exists between truth and nightmares. Sometimes when I'm alone, I wonder if this experience is unique to me, or if others have had similar strange dreams. Have others also met ghostly companions in their dreams and tried to solve these mysteries, or did they dismiss them as just imagination? Maybe there's an unseen world where people encounter strange, unexplainable things in their dreams, a place where normal rules don't apply and everything solid becomes uncertain. I may never know the truth behind the boy's plea or my mother's warning, but I can't shake the feeling that I'm not alone in experiencing this. The mystery feels like it needs to be solved, or at least acknowledged, by those who have also faced the unknown and come away unsettled. Ever since I was a young child, I've experienced hypnagogic hallucinations. Those vivid dreamlike visions that occur just before falling asleep or upon waking up. As an only child growing up, I vividly remember lying in bed at night, my mind racing with thoughts and images flickering behind my closed eyelids. Sometimes they were mundane scenes, other times bizarre supernatural occurrences. At first, these hallucinations terrified me. I would cry out for my parents, convinced that the shadowy figures or talking animals I witnessed were real. But my parents were patient and understanding. They explained that I was just having very vivid dreams as I drifted off to sleep. Over time, I learned to recognize when I was experiencing a hypnagogic hallucination and could distinguish reality from the dream world. As I got older, the hallucinations became comforting in an odd way. My mind was full of imagination and creativity. I looked forward to those strange, ephemeral visions each night as I allowed my consciousness to slip into sleep. That being said, I could always distinctly tell where the hallucinations ended and reality began, so I was never truly frightened or disturbed by them. A few years ago, my cousin and I were spending the weekend at my uncle's house. While she slept in the living room, I slept in the guest bedroom. I woke up with my eyes still closed and opened them, looking up at the ceiling. I looked towards the door beyond my feet and saw a man in his 50s, with long gray hair and a bushy beard, dressed in plaid overalls and a cowboy hat. He simply stood there with a hand on the door handle, staring at me sideways, wide-eyed and with a tight-lipped grin. Terrified like never before, I closed my eyes and hollered for my sister at the top of my lungs. After a few seconds, I opened my eyes and he was gone. I know when I have hypnagogic hallucinations. This was nothing of the sort. The next morning, I told my uncle about the chilling apparition I had seen. His face turned grave as he sat down with a sigh. "You know, an old ranch hand used to live in this house long before I bought it," he said slowly. "An old man, lived here most his life working the nearby cattle ranches." Uncle took a pause, gathering his thoughts. Old man was a bit of an eccentric loner, kept to himself most days. Townsfolk always found him a bit odd and unsettling. He didn't have any kids or wife, just seemed to exist alone on this property with his horses and livestock. Story goes, he lived here alone for decades until he passed away at a ripe old age, bedridden inside that very guest room you stayed in. Some say in his final months, struggling with dementia, he raved about seeing shadowy figures and hearing voices in the house at night. Uncle shook his head slowly. Folks around here always said his spirit had a hard time moving on after living that solitary life for so many years. Some claim to have seen his apparition still wandering the land, like he's having trouble letting go of his beloved homestead. From your description, well, it sounds like you may have encountered him yourself. I shuddered at the thought of the ghostly figure I had witnessed, suddenly piecing it all together with my uncle's haunting tale of the old ranch hand. A chill ran down my spine. So the ghastly vision I saw was likely the trapped soul of the old man himself, doomed to haunt the guest room for eternity. The revelation left me terrified. I knew I could never sleep in that room again, always wondering if the old man's restless spirit would reappear. From then on, I refused to stay overnight at my uncle's place, forever haunted by the memory of that night and what I had seen. Deep down, I truly believed I had encountered the supernatural presence of the troubled old ranch hand who couldn't let go of his beloved homestead, even after death. It had always been one of those things I believed in deep down, but could never quite put my finger on. The idea of spirits walking among us, unseen specters observing our daily lives. I've heard the stories from others who claim to have witnessed such phenomena, but I remained skeptical. That all changed a few years ago when I had my own undeniable encounter. It was a calm summer night, and I had drifted off to sleep earlier than usual after a long, draining day. My room was bathed in the gentle glow of the moonlight peeking through the curtains as I lay sprawled across my bed, arms extended outward. Suddenly, I felt an unmistakable weight press down upon my arm, jolting me from my slumber. My eyes flickered open, adjusting to the dim lighting. That's when I saw her. A tiny figure perched on the edge of my bed. She couldn't have been more than 5 or 6 years old, with rosy cheeks and a curious smile. But it was her clothing that stopped my heart. She was adorned in a dress straight out of the early 20th century, lace and petticoats swaying gently as she rocked back and forth. For a moment, I couldn't breathe, paralyzed by the impossibility of what I was witnessing. But then, as if sensing my bewilderment, she let out a tinkling laugh and scampered off the bed. her translucent form disappearing into my closet. I blinked furiously, convinced it had merely been a waking dream brought on by exhaustion. The next morning, I chalked the incident up to an overactive imagination, putting it out of my mind. That is, until my sister mentioned in passing that she had seen the silhouette of a young girl reflected in the mirror of my bedroom door the previous night. The blood drained from my face as she described the antiquated dress in perfect detail. It was a few weeks later, and I was sitting up in bed reading before turning in for the night. A slight movement in the corner of my eye caught my attention. And there she was, the young girl in her antiquated dress, casually strolling through the door as if she were simply coming home. My book tumbled from my hands as I froze, holding my breath. She didn't seem aware of my presence at first, humming a tune as she meandered about the room, peering curiously at my belongings. Then her gaze fell upon me, and I felt a chill run down my spine. Those eyes, filled with an inexplicable sadness and longing that belied her youthful visage, locked onto mine. I opened my mouth to speak, to ask her who she was, but no words would come. In that moment, she cocked her head quizzically, a faint smile playing across her lips. Before I could react, she turned and drifted back through the wall, leaving me shaken and struggling to process what I had witnessed. There was no longer any doubt. This girl, this impossibility tethered to our world by some unknown force, was very real, and I had a sinking feeling her appearance was attempting to convey something, a silent plea I did not yet understand. I don't understand why this young girl kept appearing in our house. Was she stuck and could not move on? Did she need to resolve some unfinished business? Or was she trying to tell me something that I could not understand? These questions bothered me constantly. My family and I tried every logical way to solve this puzzle, but nothing could stop her from visiting. Maybe the answer was not in this world, but in the spiritual world beyond. So we asked a local priest to perform ancient rituals, praying and blessing in hopes of allowing the young girl's soul to safely enter the afterlife. The ceremony felt very serious and important, as if the air itself was filled with significance. After the last prayers, I thought I saw the girl's figure watching closely in the corner. Our eyes met one last time, and I felt profound sadness, but also acceptance. I don't know if it was our actions or some cosmic shift that allowed it, but after that night, the girl never appeared to us again. A heaviness seemed to lift from the home. Although I will always remember her haunting presence, there is peace in knowing she has hopefully found the serenity she was so desperately searching for.